Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks. Today we are here with a preview episode is how we'll start the show. We've got UFC Perth this weekend. We had no card last weekend, but we also did not record an episode last week, so that gives us an opportunity to talk about the Noche UFC card. And since those are two themed cards, we're going to do the preview and the recap for like the main event, and we'll touch on some of the other fights we like. Then after that, we are going to pose a question about the current state of MMA and some of the regions that are currently performing well, regions not doing well, and which regions we think are currently at the top of the sport. So that's going to be a more general discussion about the current state of MMA. And then we're going to close the show with a brief discussion about Charles Oliveira and some potential replacements for Rafael Fiziev. So Charles is now in need of an opponent for that UFC Rio main event. So we're going to pose some fighters that we would like to see step in or some potential opponents. So it's a varied slate of topics, but that's kind of the approach when the Perth card isn't great. Good main event, but it's rounded out with a lot of Perth talent. And then Noche was a couple weeks ago, so obviously we're not going to go too in-depth there. So we've got a varied slate, but we will start at that UFC Perth main event. Dominick Reyes and Carlos Ulberg. And this ends up being a pretty big light heavyweight fight. Ulberg's obviously the big prospect that the UFC has been pushing for a period of time now. And Dominick Reyes has had a resurgence, and he's working his way closer to a title, and this fight ends up being pretty important for that light heavyweight division. Anthony, we can swing it over to you first. What do you make of this matchup between Dominick Reyes and Carlos Ulberg?
I think it's a pretty good one. Like you said, Ulberg has been a really good prospect. I mean, he keeps winning, keeps getting the job done, and then Reyes with the whole roller coaster of a career he's had. I think this is one of the better fights you could put on between two of these light heavyweights right now, both on some win streaks, and so I think it's a good little clash, especially and then getting to do it in front of the home crowd. I think it works for the locations it's at. So, and it's always nice to have this right before the pay-per-view too, next week.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to bring up because I completely agree that this is a fun fight. Two guys who are on winning streaks. Ulberg's last loss was was in his UFC debut. Won a bunch straight since, some knockouts, one submission, a couple decisions. Dominick Reyes, like you said, Anthony, he lost the title fight to John Jones. Whether or not people think he did, the result was a loss. Lost 3 straight, looked like he was on the cusp of being out of the UFC, and has now won 3 straight fights by knockout, so he's back. And I think to the point you made about this is a week before a pay-per-view, next weekend's pay-per-view main event is the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. So it lines up perfectly for a big win by one of these guys this weekend to maybe get that next title shot against the winner of Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev in a week's time.
Yeah, and this is a massive fight in my opinion. Aside from the title implications, which the title implications are present, but I just find this a really interesting case between two fighters and kind of where they're at in their career. The Dominick Reyes resurgence is one of the wilder things I've ever seen. I mean, I had personally, and I know a lot of people were in the same spot, I had Dominick Reyes written off pretty solid. Like, I didn't think this Dominick Reyes resurgence was going to be a thing. And it's not just the fact that he lost 3 in a row, but he lost brutally after those John Jones losses. The Jan Blachowicz loss was a beatdown. The Yuri Prochazka knockout was a brutal knockout, and Ryan Spann got him badly as well. So it was a run of like fights where he took a lot of damage as well. And then Ulberg has just kind of been steadily climbing, and it's kind of peaked here at a main event of a fight night card that has massive title implications. So I think for both of these guys, just their career trajectories, I think it makes it very interesting. And then I also think that you guys have both talked about this as well, but the title implications on the line. I'm not willing to say the winner gets a title fight here because we do have, Yuri Prochazka and Khalil Roundtree fighting as well, and I think they've got a decent bit to say about who's going to be fighting for that title next. But a fight's a fight, and we've got 2 of them, and I think it's a situation where I don't think either of these fight, like the winner of Prochazka or Roundtree, and this fight, I don't think anyone's going to be guaranteed a title shot. I think it's going to be kind of we're going to see how this plays out. We're going to look at the performances and evaluate how these guys fought, and we'll go from there when determining who gets the next title fight. So I think that in itself makes it an opportunity because I think the door is open for all 4 of these fighters.
Yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
I was just gonna say real quick. This reminded me of the welterweight picture a little bit of how we're talking about, or I'm sorry, the middleweight picture with RDR, Fluffy, all that stuff, and obviously Imavov. And I do think there is a chance here too for Ulberg or Reyes if Pereira does win. It's like, oh, does Pereira fight Jiri a 3rd time, or like Pereira, he's already beat Roundtree, and then maybe one of them could sneak it that way. Obviously, I think so. Depending on who wins, it actually could. Yeah, there's a chance it might matter more.
Now, I was going to say a different weight class with featherweight at the moment, and we saw what happened in Noche, which we'll dive into more in a bit, but with Diego Lopes and Jean Silva fighting, and that was like, okay, if you come out and put on a damn good performance, maybe you can jump the line and get the next title shot. Meanwhile, we had Lerone Murphy, who came out and did his incredible spinning knockout that kind of propelled him into the title conversation, while we have Movsar Evloev waiting on the sidelines. There's a lot of interesting things going on in this division, and I think, or in the UFC's divisions, and I do think for this light heavyweight one, the biggest thing is if Carlos Ulberg loses, I'm not saying that Dominick Reyes he's not a prospect anymore. That kind of wipes out any prospects we have in the light heavyweight division if Carlos Ulberg goes down. Because as you mentioned, Anthony, Alex Pereira has already beat Yuri. He's already beat Khalil Roundtree. He beat Jamal Hill. I don't remember if he's fought Jan Blachowicz. Oh, he did beat Jan Blachowicz in his debut. He would have beaten Magomed Ankalaev. That kind of leaves us like, who's actually going to compete in this division, and who do we have to look forward to? Because a lot of these guys are getting towards the end of their MMA career, at least in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about Ulberg as well as like a prospect. And I think there's been multiple times where we've all kind of been like, or maybe I shouldn't say all of us, but at least I know I have just kind of been slightly underwhelmed with some of these performances. The Jan Blachowicz performance was underwhelming. And there's some others as well, but it's just kind of, he's had some good ones. I don't want to make it seem like he hasn't had good performances. Like, he's sparked a few guys. He's got some knockouts. But the steps up in competition haven't been as clean of victories as you'd like. He just doesn't seem like the remarkable prospect that he's kind of being touted as. Decision win over Volkan Oezdemir. That's a fight that he can finish as well. He's got the knockout over Menafield, and that was kind of like more on Menafield fighting like an idiot than Ulberg doing anything remarkable. Like, he still lands a shot and gets to knockout. But he's been in a lot of fights that just don't really seem like a guy who's, the next big thing or a future champion. So that can change quickly, though. Like, as much as Dominick Reyes has had this resurgence, like, the big issue or concern that I personally have with Dominick Reyes is the durability. So it's like, for Ulberg, this ends up being a massive opportunity to maybe get a finish on the record here. Not that he doesn't have any, but he doesn't have any at, the upper portion of the rankings. Those have been decision wins. So it's a pretty big opportunity for him to get a potential finish here. And that's something you'd like to see for someone that the UFC is potentially building into a title challenger, especially knowing when the other options are Roundtree and Prochazka. Those are guys who finish fights. And if they don't finish fights, they tend to be on the highly entertaining side, while Ulberg is more of your point fighting decision fighter, while Roundtree and Prochazka tend to be more of your exciting brawlers, if that makes sense.
I do think it's funny. I completely forgot that Ulberg's 34.
Yeah.
So it keeps seeming like we keep using the word prospect, and it feels like he is still a prospect, but he's not that young anymore either in terms of things in this division. Dominick Reyes is a little bit over a year older than him, but still, like, it takes a toll. And I will say, just because we haven't brought him up in a while, there's one of these guys has passed a certain test on his recent winning streak, and that is Dominick Reyes passing our favorite Anthony Smith test. Just wanted to throw that out there because since he got killed, we've had no reason to talk about him. I think this might as well.
Well, that's
but
why
the Anthony Smith win is still important, whether
Yes,
he's still fighting or not. I look at that Anthony Smith win and just makes me have a little bit more faith in a fighter.
I will say, are you concerned about the stamina of Dominick Reyes anymore? Because you just talked about Carlos Ulberg. His last 2 fights went to a decision where he won. Dominick Reyes' 3-fight win streaks finished in the first round. 2 of them were done in the first round within 2.5 minutes, and the other was late into the second round. But he hasn't had to go the distance at all recently, and he's gotten these done by knockout. If Ulberg, who you said already, James, is a point-fighting guy, if he has to be, do you think that plays to his advantage in this one?
I mean, that's an interesting point because, yeah, on the resurgence by Reyes, he has only been, he has been knocking these people out. But I don't think cardio was ever really one of his issues, though. Give or take, he had the background of what made him special was that he was kind of just an athlete, with power and just, I guess, more athleticism than other people in this division. I think, he went 5 with Jones and everything, too. So I think, that might even benefit. I'm trying to remember that Jan fight if Jan got tired. That was a 5-rounder, though, was it? The Jan Ulberg one?
No, it's 3.
Okay. So I was trying to remember, but I think Reyes is capable of fighting strong over 5 rounds and stuff. I think that would actually, I think to James's point too, what's worrisome about Reyes is that chin could be cracked at any time, and maybe he'll go back to that losing streak. So if that fight's going 5 rounds, that might actually be a good sign for Reyes. But I know ideally you'd probably, if you're picking Reyes here, I think you'd be going for a finish maybe, because since he's fighting a point fighter. But I'd say if that fight goes 5 rounds, that's probably a really good sign for Reyes.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic where I wouldn't be concerned about Reyes's cardio. If you tell me this goes to decision, that wouldn't be my concern. My concern would be, what does it look like for him to win rounds? That would be my concern, because a lot of his good performances recently have been like emphatic knockouts. What does it look like from an offensive output perspective if he's not getting knockouts, and how does he win rounds with volume or stuff like that? That would be kind of my concern. But at the same time, if he's not getting knocked out, Ulberg isn't exactly like stamping rounds. It feels like some of these rounds that he's been winning recently have been close. So I think this could be a really weird fight if it ends up going to decision, because that means Reyes' durability isn't getting checked. But that also means, like, Ulberg's a very good counter striker, and if Reyes isn't getting knocked out, I question how much he's actually being offensive, to the point where he's not eating any counters. I almost think this could turn into like a low volume Carlos Ulberg leg kick and jab fest if this does go late. So that would be my thoughts on a potential decision.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think this could get to be a very sloppy fight, or not sloppy, but a rather boring fight in a way, if it is just jab and kick and move type things from either guy. So they both know the power that they're facing, and I think that's always brings caution with it as well.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as predictions go, the betting odds have the fight lined with Carlos Ulberg as a -265 favorite and Dominick Reyes as a +200 underdog. I think I'm going to side with Ulberg here. And the main reason for that is because Reyes' resurgence has largely been through counter-striking. and I think Reyes is willing to go first. I just think it's been more of a happenstance that, Kurlov's getting the most, aggressive that he's ever been with his hands and just getting countered silly. I don't think Ulberg's going to make that level of mistake. And I think Ulberg is more content to just sit on the outside and do his jabs and low kicks and wait for Reyes. And I think Reyes is going to be the one to crack. I think this is going to start with two guys trying to counter each other. And I think Reyes is going to be the guy to crack and get aggressive first. And then that's going to leave Ulberg with the chances to counter strike. I don't think Ulberg is going to break over the course of 5 rounds and feel like he needs to get aggressive. And that's just, even at like performances of his that are less impressive, that's been something that he has shown that he, if need be, will gladly just not be over aggressive. And I think his more passive approach is going to actually help him here. And I think Reyes is going to be the guy to go. And eventually, even if he starts kind of more of a counter striking approach, I think he eventually goes first. And I think that's when Ulberg will land the big shot, the big counter, and hurt Reyes and get a finish. So I think I've also picked against Reyes in his whole entire resurgence. I've just been like, there's no way he can keep doing it. So I might be wrong on Reyes. I might just be flat out wrong. So, but I do think it's going to be Ulberg this weekend. I think he gets a knockout eventually.
Yeah, I mean, the safe play definitely was probably on Ulberg. I do like the knockout pick though, because kind of like you said earlier, it only takes one. Like Leon was a point fighter. Everyone remembers the Kamaru Usman. Just with people that even just don't get finished, all it takes is one. With and in the most important fights and the biggest fights, weirdly enough, is sometimes when it happens, because I have an issue with Merab not finishing fights. Just got a submission in the title fight. So if you were to do it here, that'd be a massive stage to do it on. But I agree that some of my problems with Ulberg is I think I don't like when people rely on counter striking so much, and it seems like they can't get off as much offense as I think they should without it, or to press the issue. But in saying that, I can see over 5 rounds, Ulberg definitely has the talent to win a point fight with staying on the outside, obviously his kicks and everything. And I don't know if, like you said, Reyes will do that. So I think the knockout is live. So, but I will be rooting for Reyes. So there's a chance I just want to send it at the end, and I'm calling. We'll see. It's Tuesday. There's a chance on Friday I'm going Reyes by knockout and give him like the title.
Hey, I mean, like you said, that's part of the sport. You never know, but I think it's funny that in his last 3 fights for Reyes, he landed 8 total strikes against Krylov, had 4 landed against him, so not exactly a big discrepancy. He landed 20-6, I think, against Dustin Jacoby. I think he landed like 172-9 against Anthony Smith. One of those guys is not in the UFC anymore, rightfully so. And I'm kind of concerned against a guy who, if he is so reliant on just, you're going to throw first, I'm going to move and then hit you. I'm not sure that's going to be the right game plan. And we know the Australian crowd is going to be behind Carlos Ulberg 110%. So I'm leaning towards Ulberg at the moment. But like you said, it's Tuesday. Maybe something happens. Maybe we see some weight issues or something crazy is happening in the next couple of days. But my gut right now says Ulberg wins, and I think he'll win relatively easily, decision-wise. I do think it'll go a decision, and I think he'll win at least 4-1 on the scorecards.
Gotcha. All right, let's swing it over to some of these other UFC Perth fights. We won't go quite in depth on some of the other fights, but we'll do final thoughts per usual. Talk about some of the other fights that stand out to us on the card. Jerry, I think it's your turn to lead us off here. UFC Perth, final thoughts. What else is standing out to you on this fight card? It's not the greatest fight card. This is one where we have a lot more of the second tier of Australians, because they do have a Sydney card coming up eventually, and this is a lot more of the guys that it feels like they're getting the the leftovers, but it's coming first. They're saving the main course and the entree for that Sydney card.
Yeah, I will say one of the guys I'm excited to watch, just because at least in his last 3 fights, he's either gotten a finish or he's been finished, is Jack Jenkins. He just seems an entertaining character, and the crowd always likes him in Australia. Him and Ramon Tavares should be a relatively entertaining fight. And then the other one, I really didn't realize until I was looking over this beforehand that Neil Magny's fighting against Jake Matthews. So the fact that Neil Magny, now unranked, is still going at it, I'm curious to see what he has to show for the young Australian.
Yeah, you took my 2 picks. No, I was gonna say I do like Jack Jenkins. I think he's pretty entertaining. I know he's lost a couple, so this is just would be an interesting one for me to watch because I did like what I saw out of him for a couple of the fights. Jake Matthews, no Magny is a crazy fight to make. I heard just when I first woke up, Tafa is off the card. I don't know if anyone can confirm that. I did see that right before we hopped on here. And then, I don't know a whole bunch of these fighters. I guess the last one is for the main event of the prelim. Navajo Sterling Rodolfo is not it's not the worst fight you could make. There's certainly, I'm sure there's some other fine ones on here. And I'm just unfamiliar with these fighters, but yeah, I do think this card is a little slim.
Yeah, it's
So,
definitely a slim card.
Was it Junior Tafa who pulled out or Justin Tafa?
Oh, it could have been either.
Because I am saying it exactly. Because I was going to say, I guess now looking at it, it was Junior Tafa who had to pull out due to some sort of injury and controversy, but Justin Tafa is still fighting. So, because I was thinking we've seen it happen twice already in the last year, where one of them gets hurt and the other comes in on short notice replacement to back him up. So
it was Junior then. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so some of these, Anthony threw out the Navajo Sterling and Adolfo Bellato. I'm very interested to see Sterling, just how he performs, because he's been touted as a big prospect, but I just haven't seen it yet. So I'm interested to see if I can see it here. So as long as he's fighting, I'm going to have an eye on that, kind of being like, all right, is this the one where I'm finally impressed? So I'll have an eye on Sterling for that reason. And then Jonathan McAleef versus Oban Elliott. McAleef is a guy that some people liked off Contenders. Once again, not exactly a guy I've been thrilled about, but other people may be more excited about that, so I'll throw that out there as one that maybe if you're looking for people to watch, that may be the one. Cam Roston versus Andre Petroski, I think it's just kind of a funny fight, not exactly anything hilarious, but anytime we get 2 middleweights who are, kind of at this level, I think it's not a terrible fight. One I am pretty interested in is Josias Musasa versus Colby Thicknesse. These are 2 guys who have shown something. Musasa, I believe, lost his UFC debut. This is his second outing. Thicknesse, I believe, lost to Toporia's brother, if I'm remembering correctly. So both of these guys have shown some positives. But they're both 0-1 in the UFC, so it ends up being kind of important for both of them not to fall to 0-2. So that one's a sneaky, important fight. And then my pick for fight of the night would probably be Tom Nolan and Charlie Campbell. Those are 2 guys who like to scrap, so I do think that one's going to be a pretty good fight. But overall, I will agree with the sentiment that this isn't the greatest fight card by any means. And there's, we've got multiple people on this card that I've never heard of. It's just, and not even from a UFC fighter perspective, we're bringing in, they signed 2 guys who are supposed to fight on Contenders and just are having them fight on this card. That doesn't really make much sense to me. So that's we've got a fight like that on the prelims. We got a Tafa brother fighting a debutante from Scotland named Louis. I don't know this Louis fella at all. So there's a lot of things that just aren't the highest level here. And even the quote unquote prospects, the Australian prospects that we do have on the card aren't guys that's this is one I gotta see. They're just kind of fine, and that's it. So it's not the best card. top to bottom, in my opinion. But I do think it's a good main event, so I won't complain too much. So, all right.
I did just out of curiosity, I looked up this Louis Sutherland, Scottish guy. Nickname is the Vanilla Gorilla. So I'm assuming that means he's going to try and knock Justin Tafa out, which, as of late, has happened pretty consistently, it seems. So
yeah,
could see a nice finish there.
That nickname tends to not, I feel like, do well.
yeah. I think this is a prime example of like, shit, we need heavyweights. Just get him in here. Like, Louis should probably be fighting on Contender Series right now, but we need a heavyweight. So, yeah, they just have also recently signed like 4 new heavyweights who are all like 6-1 and 6-0. It's like, all right, these are all guys who should be fighting on Contenders, but we're so desperate for heavyweights that we just like said screw it and we'll throw them right on a UFC card. We'll have them skip Contenders. So
we'll see how this Louis guy's 10-3. So I mean, not the best record to be making your UFC debut with.
No, he'll probably go 2-4 in the UFC and get cut. Never seen him fight, but it's the way a lot of these heavyweights go. All right. Let's take a little bit of a trip back in time here to Noche UFC. This was not last Saturday, the Saturday before, but we have not recorded since this fight happened, and it was a big one. Diego Lopes versus Gene Silva. Diego Lopes got that knockout in the second round. I thought this was an absolutely tremendous fight from an entertainment perspective. Great showcase for the UFC for what ended up being a big day in combat sports. This was a great fight. Anthony, you can lead us off here. What did you make of Diego Lopes versus Gene Silva?
I wish it was a little longer. We knew, and we probably said it was a while ago, but this was live. This is something that could happen, but it started off really well. I was immediately a little surprised how Lopes went to the wrestling really quick, and it was super efficient in as well, and was brutalizing him with some ground and pound and with some elbows, kind of to the top of the head. But then, even with that, you saw what you wanted to see is Silva's taking all this damage, but isn't giving up and gets right back to his feet. And then when he gets to the feet, kind of in the second round too, or he gets up in the first, but then still in the second round, he was actually starting to win some exchanges. And I thought tat Lopes up on the feet a little bit. And then Silva, throws his elbows, throws his spinning elbows. And Lopes said, I like that. How about I try one? And doesn't matter, as much as we talk about durability and people's chin strength, that doesn't matter when you get hit in the temple. And then there goes all your equilibrium and everything. And then good finishing instincts right there too from Lopes, and was able to get him out of there. And that was a fantastic, a great statement win. And yeah, my only thing, it was a great overall thing. You saw a highlight knockout too. I just wish it could have been a longer fight. That was really fun for the 2 rounds it was happening.
Yeah, it was just nonstop action the entire time. They were doing a lot of spinning shit, which ultimately led to the demise of Jean Silva. But to the point you made, Anthony, or at least you brought up, it's after he got hit on the temple and you could tell Jean Silva was hurt and going down. It was so quick for Diego Lopes just to get on top of him and just finish him off and make sure he was not staying in that fight. Huge win for Diego Lopes. We already saw him fight for the belt once this year. Didn't go his way. I think this is more of the stepping stone he needed than moving immediately up to fight one of the best featherweights we've seen ever in Alexander Volkanovski. For Jean Silva, not back to the drawing board, but there's definitely some holes still, and you have to because he was on the ground a lot of that first round, and it worked well for Diego Lopes, and I wonder if he kind of got a little concerned in that second round of the threat of a takedown and let himself get a little carried away and let his hands drop a bit too much, but something that we're not in the locker room, so don't know what was really going on in his head, but this is just something that I kind of saw it seemed like he was afraid of getting taken down and controlled for another round.
Yeah, and I thought this was a really good performance from Diego Lopes. When I look back at the things that Diego has done in the UFC, this is probably his best performance from an offensive wrestling perspective. Um, you could say he's had better grappling performances because he's landed submissions, and that's fair. But I think this was his best showing in terms of landing a takedown, getting to a really strong position, landing some ground and pound. I think those were all things that he showed improvements in. And I think if he can continue to grow in that area, he can be an even more dangerous fighter because we've talked about guys. Brian Ortega is a great example in this division where it's like, dude, your grappling is great, but you can't land a takedown to save your life, and you just can't dictate where the fight is happening. And I think if Diego can get to a point where he can trust his takedown offense, I think that really opens up another level to his game where, if you're in there with a guy like Gene Silva, for example, um, and Gene Silva's Gene landed a lot of shots in that second round. Or maybe it's a guy like Volkanovski. Volkanovski obviously has great wrestling in his own right, but like the ability to go out there and land some takedowns in moments where you're maybe falling behind in pure boxing exchanges, I think could unlock a pretty big level in Lopez's game. And it's also a great way for him to decrease some risk because it feels like anytime Lopez is out there striking with somebody, feels like it's a risky game just based on where his level of defense is at. His level of offense is tremendous. I mean, we saw that with that spinning elbow and the following finish, but before that, he was getting tagged up a little bit. So the ability to land some takedowns and get to strong positions, I think, is something if he can do consistently, I would be really, really really impressed and probably much higher on him as an overall fighter in a really talented division. And then for Gene Silva, I'm interested to see if this is going to become a bigger issue for the remainder of his career. Like, is this going to be, next thing you know, you're in there with Aljamain Sterling and Aljamain's landing takedowns at will? Like, is that the type of stuff that we're going to run into here? Or is this like got by Diego Lopes once, and then we go back to some of the defensive grappling he showed against Bryce Mitchell? I think both are real outcomes, but I'm interested to see which one kind of wins out. And as far as what's next for both of these guys, I don't know about you guys, but I do think this pretty solidly locked up a Lerone Murphy title shot just based on the fact that Lopez has already got one. Great performance, but I don't think it's enough to incite an immediate rematch with Volkanovski. So I think we still get Murphy versus Volkanovski. I think Lopez versus Movsar Evloev makes a level of sense. So I think that's probably the way that I would go as far as booking that championship fight. And then Lopez versus Evloev is a pretty good number one contender for whoever wins that Murphy and Volkanovski fight. That's kind of the way that I would approach this.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I mean, it's the fact that Volkanovski also wants to fight either at the end of this year in December or early January. Not saying that he took a bunch of damage, but who knows how quick of a turnaround Diego Lopes can have at the moment. So there's that. And I mean, we saw his UFC debut on short notice against Movsar Evloev, ultimately lost that, but really that's when he kind of first blew up as far as, oh my God, this kid coming out of nowhere is taking this undefeated Russian grappler on the ground and surviving and doing damage and looking good. I think that's a fight I want to see back. And I do also think Lerone Murphy had a better highlight reel finish and probably deserves it. And I mean, as I think what Anthony, you were talking about earlier, we've seen so many guys already getting rematches. I don't think we need another Diego Lopes rematch.
Yeah, it's something I wouldn't be opposed to, but I agree. If Murphy right there, he looked great in his last one. He's on the win streak and everything. And I think that would be a fun fight between him and Volk as well. And then I think a Lopez Murphy fight would be fun if that's how, everything plays out too. But I do think that Evloev it's a crazy pull for like Lopez, here's your reward, but also we gotta have Movsar start fighting pretty soon. But I think everything's there with Jerry, like you mentioned. There was the first fight, and then Lopez was calling for it, wanting it back, wanting that rematch, and then Movsar never doing it. And then once Lopes started getting all these fans, getting all these wins, then Movsar all of a sudden was trying to call him out. And Lopes is like, well, you're too late now. So I think if we were to finally see that one back, because I feel like the asterisk is that it was Lopes's debut fight. And it was a 3-rounder too, so I wouldn't mind seeing that for 5. But I think that could be a lot of fun as well.
I also want to put it this way. Since they fought, Movsar Evloev and Diego Lopes, Movsar Evloev has fought twice. And they fought May 2023. He beat Arnold Allen and Aljamain Sterling, both by decision. Meanwhile, Diego Lopes went on a 5-fight win streak, earned a title shot, lost the title shot, and got back to another knockout finish. And people are wondering why Movsar Evloev isn't getting a title shot.
Yeah, the UFC will do anything but give Evloev a title shot, and I think from their perspective, like, we saw Diego give him some trouble, so that's a decent guy for the UFC to be like, maybe he can be the guy to beat Evloev. Because, like, they're just trying to find guys who can beat Evloev. Like, there's a reason they picked Pico. They wanted Pico's debut to be Evloev because they're like, well, you know, Pico, really good wrestler, so he's probably not just going to get taken down and exposed, but also in the boxing, like, he hits hard enough to where he might just flatline Evloev. Like, that fight was very strategically picked for a guy who could potentially beat Evloev. Like, that's why that fight was booked. And it feels like if that's kind of the route they're going to go, trying to find guys who can beat Evloev, like, I think, you know, a guy who's already shown to give him a level of issue once is a decent route to go from the UFC's perspective as well. And then as far as Gene Silva goes, like, not to say I don't care, but, like, there's a lot of ways they can book fun fights with Gene Silva, you know. Patricio Pitbull, Yair Rodriguez, Arnold Allen. Like, there's just a level. Josh Emmett versus Yusuf Zalal. He could fight either of those guys. The winner, you know, there's just a lot of routes here for Silva. So I don't really have a preference. I just think we should stick to kind of the fun side for right now. Like, eventually down the line, we can test them against, like, another really good grappler. But, like, right now, like, we can just stick with some of the more fun matchups that kind of would, like, similar to what we just did, just a little bit lower stakes.
100% agree. I think, you know, he got his nod for the super heavy jump up in competition, came up short. Okay, now get him back to, like, a normal trajectory. Any fight you put him with too, I think is I'm fine with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he should. I think it's easier to say who I don't think he should fight. I don't think he should fight Brian Ortega. I know Brian Ortega is getting older, but if he does end up on the ground with Ortega, that might get ugly. Same with Aljamain Sterling, and I'm still curious about what Arnold Allen, how he's going to look when he eventually returns. So maybe that one would be a fun fight, but otherwise, anyone who's going to just stand up and bang with him and put on a chaotic fight is fine by me.
I will say if Ortega can make 145 pounds, that fight might be funny. I'll just, like, the way the X's and O's of that one, like, Ortega gets knocked out 4 times, but doesn't actually get knocked out. And then the next thing you know, he's on top or he's going for a guillotine. Like, that might just be one of the funniest fights you can book in the UFC, but probably, like I said, wouldn't necessarily be the route that I go. But
yeah,
if they book that one, it's high risk, high reward.
And
the risk is Brian Ortega's life, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it is to the point that I don't even think he can make 145 anymore. We saw how bad it was the other week whenever he fought last. So,
yeah. All right. Let's round out this UFC Noche card with some final thoughts. Jerry, I think it's your turn to lead us off on final thoughts. The rest of this card, what stood out to you?
I only saw, like, the last 4 or 5 fights, but Kelvin Gastelum, I will say, despite him coming in overweight, like, I don't know how he looked. I don't think he was all that impressive, being a guy who you know is going to come in heavy, and especially at middleweight now. I don't see him really beating anybody of any note anytime soon, but it was one that I think more post-fight. Was it DC or was it DC who was in the octagon at Noche as the interviewer?
I do not remember.
All right, whoever it was, they didn't even give him the option to talk because he's like, yeah, you already messed up so badly this week. We're not giving you any option. That kind of caught my eye because it's not very often we have that. But otherwise, I'll say there's a couple nice finishes. So I guess the Dusko Todorovic submission is the one that I'll mention.
Daniel Jose Medina. It was a good ride, my friend. It was a fun ride, but unfortunately, the ride is over.
Yeah. The end is
a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. If you can see if you can take a break from like, oh, we're trying to figure out who the best in the world is and just have a little bit of fun, Daniel Jose Medina it was a fun ride, I will say.
Even if he went over 3, it was entertainment the entire time in and outside the octagon.
That is correct.
I didn't get to. I was working opening, but that's why it worked out. I perfectly got off as I was watching, so that was the only one I got. But I heard, I'll kind of lob it up to you. I heard David Martinez look pretty nice. I don't know. See what you think. At least got the decision done, and then I know the prospect Santiago Luna got the KO, and that is now 4 in a row. We had talked about it before. This card, but that is 4 knockouts in a row for Alexander Hernandez, or 4 wins in a row, and I think they might be finishes as well. But give or take, Diego Ferreira's like 40. But I know we were talking about for someone trying to fight. Can't remember. Was it BSD? For BSD maybe fighting someone, and that is 4 in a row for Alexander Hernandez. So it could be there.
Yeah, I don't hate the shot at Hernandez getting a ranked fight. That was one of the – I kind of was in and out a little bit, so I didn't catch all of these fights. But the Hernandez fight was one of them, and I liked what I saw from Hernandez. And he's kind of always been like a guy with the potential and kind of been a little bit of a weight class tweener, and it looks like he's settling in it at lightweight. And I'm interested to see what could happen there if we start giving Hernandez some ranked fights. I think he's probably earned it at this point, and I think he was probably one of the better performers from this card. I unfortunately did not see the David Martinez Rob Font fight. That was one I wanted to see, missed out on, and you can't rewatch fights now. Like, it's just like horrendous trying to rewatch a fight that you missed through ESPN or UFC Fight Pass. So I haven't been able to rewatch that fight yet. I'll watch it eventually, but like trying to I've got ESPN, I've got UFC Fight Pass, and UFC Fight Pass will be like, no, you can't watch this fight. And then ESPN just doesn't let you rewatch old fights now. So trying to watch fights that you miss in real time has become a burden. So hopefully this new Paramount deal kind of snaps something in place as far as some rewatch, because I'll gladly run some old fights back that I missed, but they just don't let you know, which is kind of ridiculous.
I will say on that fight, it was a little disappointing from Rob Font, to say the least. He seemed like he wanted to, because I remember him fighting Corey Sandhagen on short notice and him just getting taken to the ground and controlled the whole time. He seemed like the one who was trying to get takedowns. He went 0 for 5 in the first 2 rounds.
What the hell?
Didn't really let his hands go at all. So he was trying to be a wrestler and try and take down Martinez. And it wasn't like Martinez was landing in abundance from what I remember, but it was one that it did not look like the Rob Font that we're used to seeing at all. So that's my just 2 cents on that fight. And ultimately kind of gassed out towards the end. And Martinez did look good in that fight.
Rob Font, offensive wrestling, certainly was not on my bingo card. I will say that. All right. So now we're going to switch it over to kind of a more broad topic about the state of MMA. And one of the themes here that we've had recently is UFC's been doing a lot of traveling and a lot more regional cards. We have obviously Noche UFC and UFC Perth that we just talked about. We're taking another trip to Brazil. Obviously a lot over there in the Middle East. Currently no U.S. champion. So we're currently at an interesting point as far as MMA goes. So we're going to have a discussion here about kind of the state of MMA and how regional MMA is shaping up and which regions are kind of ahead or behind. So, Jerry, we can swing it over to you first, and let's get your take on where you sit here as far as which region is kind of impressing you at the moment?
I mean, it's to me, it's between a big three almost. Traditionally, it's been Brazil, the U.S., and Russia. I think it's less so all of Russia in general, and it's more now the Dagestani region. You see Magomed Ankalaev, you see Islam. I think Hamza was Chechenian, isn't he? He wasn't from Dagestan.
Yep.
So there's that side. Then it's similar, but I'm going with a more cult country representation. Georgia has to be towards the top for me, alongside these two. Ilia Topuria, Merab Dvalishvili, and I know Merab trains in New York, and I think Ilia trains somewhere else as well, but that's the heritage. And those two guys have looked so good and been on such dominant win streaks at the moment that I almost might give my nod to them. And I will say the only other one that has multiple champions might be that Australia, is Australia, but I feel like they've taken a step back in recent times outside of Jack Della Maddalena.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree if I know there was that whole thing about even like I remember like Chael and people were talking about it became like an actual weird talking point, but like have just I guess the lack of American talent right now compared to the past or at any moments in the past. And I get it with I mean as you could not the perfect comparison, but I mean you could see it in the NBA. Obviously, in the NBA there's still a whole lot of American talent, but when the sports get bigger and you're getting more talent from other countries and stuff, of course you're gonna have Giannis, Joker, Luka. You're gonna get more top end talent too. So it's not gonna be all Americans, but I do see some concern with the lack of American talent right now. But I mean, it's hard not to say Dagestan and the Russian area. I don't know exactly the exact breakdown of every country that some of them are from. But then my pick, too, would have been Georgia, just with, I think, maybe two of the most dominant champions right now being Georgian and like on the biggest win streaks and such. So I think with Topuria and Merab, that would be, if I had to pick an absolute one, I would think I'd lean there.
Yeah, I think one thing right now is I think the UFC is doing a really good job of spreading out regionally, and I think they're finding a lot of good talent from a lot of different places in the world. I think that's kind of been highlighted through contenders. As far as the best right now, I think it's hard to shy away from the Dagestani region as far as top tier elite talent goes. I think they're the best at producing champions at the moment, but I don't think they're the best at like filling out the UFC roster. I think a lot of these Dagestani guys tend to be like an all or nothing type of thing. So I'd say the Dagestanis are the best at producing that top tier talent, but I think that obviously the roster is going to be filled out with your American like regional level fighter and your Brazilian regional level fighter. Like those two countries will always kind of make up probably the largest percentages of the roster. But I've been really impressed with the emerging level of talent we've seen from Australia and their ability to produce UFC caliber fighters, even if like Volkanovski and Della Maddalena are the only elite guys. Whitaker was starting to slip, obviously, but like their ability to produce quality fighters, even if they're not world class, I think has been really, really, really impressive. The amount of guys that have come in from Australia who have looked solid, may not be world beaters. A lot of them are on this card and they'll be on future Sydney cards, but Australia's ability to produce consistent UFC caliber talent, I think, has been really impressive. And I think we're seeing a growth in Europe with that as well, whether that be Spain, I think is going to be a place where over the next 5 years, we're going to get a lot of talent in. I believe his name was Hetcher Sosa last name maybe eluding me, but the guy they signed off contenders a couple weeks ago looked to be pretty good. Obviously, you have Topuria at the top of the game, but your Joel Alvarez's of the world look good. And I just think that's a region where they're probably going for the size of the country. I think they're going to be producing a good amount of UFC level talent for pure size, and some of the surrounding countries as well, and some of the smaller European countries looks like they're producing some quality talent as well. You know, some smaller areas like I believe Keita, who they just signed, was from Belgium, and I think some of those smaller countries are going to produce. France has done a similar thing, but I've been almost more impressed with the ability for some of these smaller countries to help fill out the roster with quality talent. So that's kind of been my big thing as far as regional growth is.
And we're talking about regional growth in Europe, which is unparalleled at the moment. We've talked about the good sides. I think one of the most disappointing regions as of late has to be Africa, in my opinion. It's apart from maybe a brief period where Francis Ngannou wasn't the champion, and it was when Alex Pereira first got the belt, and then when Sean Strickland was the champ for about 100 days. This is the first time we don't have a champion from Africa or representing Africa since March of 2019, when I think Kamaru Usman first won his title. So that is a complete fall off from everything. Francis Ngannou is not even in the UFC anymore. Izzy's not fighting at all at the moment. DDP just got absolutely dominated. Not saying he didn't have a good run. And then Kamaru Usman's kind of fallen a bit by the wayside as well. He's trying to make a revival as well as of late. But it's one that there was a point in time, at least recently, that you'd be looking at this and be like, yeah, the African fighters is probably the best region of mixed martial artists in the world at the moment, as far as the most successful. So I think that's a massive fall off.
Well, that's a good way to break it down to, James, when you first, because I guess I was only thinking of it as like the top end talent, but when it comes to actually judging a region, I think it is what you fully should do is judge the fighter base as a whole, because I know people do like to see like Dagestanis like are just domination and they're the best fighters, and it's like, yeah, those three people are the best fighters. What about everyone else though? I'm not seeing the Dagestani handcuff 3-round sit-a-thon domination in that fight, but and then to Jerry's point, I do that. Yeah, the Three Kings era or whatever, where but I mean, because Usman and Izzy defended as much as they can, and then to UFC, I mean, just outright went against Ngannou to like kind of screw him over, so that was unfair. But you would think now that's been some, I mean, look how much we've watched Usman and Izzy kind of not fall from grace, but just get older and lose more fights in the meantime. And it does feel like there's no one really taking up the mantle yet or surging.
Yeah, and I think another disappointing thing about Africa is they also haven't produced a lot of roster filler. And if that might not be the greatest word, but like if you can produce 15 UFC level fighters, now your chances of getting to a champion, one of those guys panning out, gets a lot better. And I've had prospects that I've been interested in, and guys that I've have come through contenders. Ateba Gautier has been a guy who has done some positive things in a short UFC tenure, look good on contenders. Josias Musa, who's fighting this weekend, who we talked about a little bit earlier in Final Thoughts. He's a guy who high potential, but he's 0-1 in the UFC. And right now, I think a lot of the guys that Africa is producing are high risk, high reward, or high floor, high ceiling, low floor type of fighters. And they're just not producing them at a quantity that is really going to strike over a large course of time. And I think if the three champions plus Duplessis, I think if those guys would have been the champions like 2 years ago, I think it'd be a little bit of a different discussion because you could project like some growth in the region. But I think the growth because they all were champions like a half decade ago at this point. Like you probably would have liked to see some of the growth. You would have liked to see just a higher amount of fighters crack into the UFC. Obviously, it's a hard thing to do from that region. You just don't have the level of resources that you would even in other countries like Brazil, for example, it's just simply easier to get into a gym and make strides. Even if you're not in a great portion of the world, it's easier to access the MMA resources. So it's not like it's kind of a result of the region as well, but I think it still would have been nice to see a couple more fighters, even guys like Cameron Simon has just not hit at the rate that you would like to see for him. He's lost several prospect versus prospect matchups here against Wellmaker, against Talbot, and those guys are good, but you know, when that's one of the only guys that you have representing the region, when he's losing, it just kind of is a little bit of a hit.
Yeah, I could have missed somebody, but I was just looking through the rankings, and I think there's only 2 guys that we haven't mentioned as far as that were an African champion that are even ranked, and it's Yusuf Zalal, who's from Morocco, and then David Onana, who's from Uganda. And those guys aren't exactly looking like championship material anytime soon.
I do think though too, like, I mean, the UFC not going to Africa, give or take, kind of when Usman and them were champion and Izzy, you know, there was COVID and such, but like UFC's going to Australia. This is just in like the next month. Australia, Brazil, Canada, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar. It's like, so the UFC is definitely starting to go more places, as it should, but it seems like that they kind of missed their opportunity to go to Africa, and I know there's always talks about them thinking about going there, but I'd love to see it like in actual practice, and then you could get a baseline of some of that talent, you know, because same way with this card, there's a lot of like Australian talent, or obviously if it's a Noche or something, you get to see a lot of Mexican talent. So it'd just be nice to see that too, if they ever were to go to Africa.
And I will say, just off the back of that, it's also gives exposure to the UFC to people who maybe haven't seen it before. Say, I mean, it's not like all of Africa doesn't have TV or ways to watch stuff, but it's like now that those 3 guys are gone, it's like there's no real. I can't imagine there's much of an attraction to the UFC as there is for, say, other sports. It's like even boxing to an extent has a little bit more in Africa, I would think. Obviously, soccer is by far the biggest, but it's basketball. You see that. You see a couple NFL players even coming over. It's one that it's like there's not going there, there's no way to see if there is interest and if there is going to be a growth in it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a couple other fighters that at one point had high hopes. Sadiq Youssef has been on, just simply put, a slide. As much as I like Sadiq a lot.
I'll watch every fight he has.
Yeah, but he hasn't hit the level that I personally thought he was going to, and I think other people had higher hopes for him as well. Kennedy and Jeshnaku also, you know, that heavyweight run has kind of been stifled, but maybe he could turn it around because it is heavyweight. So like, we're not asking a ton there to really turn some things around. And then to bridge it over to another region that I have not been thrilled with has been Canada. Has just been another one that seems like isn't producing the level of fighter that you would expect for a country that had George St. Pierre, for a country that has a ton of UFC events, a ton of UFC resources, one of the best gyms in the world in TriStar. Like, and as far as resources go, like you can move down to America. Like it's obviously just, you know, getting over and obviously you have to go through the citizenship process and doing that type of stuff. But like the resources are there for Canadian UFC fighters. And we really have not seen a big exposure or a big improvement there. A lot of the best Canadian fighters have been losing. They famously had that Canadian card last year where every single male fighter lost. And a lot of the guys that they're signing out of Canada just simply do not look impressive. And it kind of feels more like well, they're going to Canada and we got to fill it with Canadian talent. So this fighter is going to get signed. The exception of probably the most impressive Canadian has been Jasmine Judavicius lately. She's performed well. And their big prospect, Mike Malott, big fraud check against Neil Magny as of late. I think he's turned it around since. But, you know, when you're losing to Neil Magny, you got to make some pretty big improvements to really crack it in that welterweight division. So that's just the country I think has disappointed from every single angle, and it's probably the one that has probably been the most disappointing when you look at the level of resource availability and all those types of things. Canada has just been slacking practically.
Yeah, Canada has been in a rough shape as of late. But I do have one more question for you guys, just kind of around the topic of regions and all that, because we've talked a lot about the outside of the U.S., the rest of the world. With Kayla Harrison being the only UFC American champion, there's talks of obviously the White House card next year, and they're trying to see if someone can get up there. John Jones is now retired. Who do you even see as the face of American MMA at this point?
It's a good question.
I honestly have no idea. I'm like looking through, and it's the only guys who kind of represent America who are towards the top are Sean O'Malley, Josh Van, but he won't be there yet. I don't. Maybe Max Holloway, but there's not a whole lot of, and I think that's an issue with the U.S. is at this moment is there's not a lot of just top-notch American talent that doesn't end up losing to someone else, and you maybe get the title shot, but you're not going to give it to Sean Strickland, are you?
Yeah, I think another aspect of this is there isn't the same level of pride almost, and I think this happens a little bit with Brazil as well. But since there's been so many quality fighters, there's so many ranked fighters that I don't think there's a big like, oh, this guy is American. Like every single guy, like Tom Aspinall, it's like he is and same when Leon was the champ. Like those guys are the guys from England. Those are the English champions. And I don't think there's that same level of pride for the guys from America to be the American champion. And even if a guy like Max Holloway is the best American fighter at the moment, it doesn't feel like he is kind of looking to represent America. He's much more interested in representing Hawaii. A guy like Sean O'Malley has never been massive in being like, I'm going to represent America. And when he did, and he walked out to whatever song it was before his last fight, it almost felt forced when he tried to represent America a little bit more. And some of the other guys who do take pride in representing America, John recently retired, Sean Strickland just not good enough, Michael Chandler on a slide, Colby Covington not quite good enough. So a lot of the guys who do take pride in representing America are either retired or just simply not good enough. Poirier was good.
The worst base in the UFC.
Yeah, and it's like not even the guys like Poirier, American, but he was much more interested in representing Louisiana. And a lot of the guys who end up being the better American-born fighters are much more interested in representing a region. Guys like Corey Sandhagen doesn't really represent America or a region. Brandon Royval is more big on like, hey, I'm training out of Denver, like, so it's almost more regionalized than it is representing America, at least for the guys who are performing right now.
I was gonna say the only other one I can think of that might be representing America at times would be Justin Gaethje, but even then, like, that's the only one I could think of that's actually having any sort of success or relevancy, I guess is the word as of late.
Yeah.
I think it's tough. That's what it always, that's happens when you have a melting pot in a diverse countries. People tend to, there's a reason it's Mexican American, Chinese American, all these things. You being in the country and being diverse itself is still a testament to America and everything good about it. But obviously, you're more cultural heritage and stuff, or even like you were saying, the regional place. Like how big of a West Coast guy I am, just from being from Sacramento in California, and people feel that same way about being from New York and the East Coast or Atlanta in the South and stuff like that, or Midwest. So it's all that. But the last I was going to go with Sandhagen for another pick, but like you said, doesn't really represent. But I think if he were to get a win, I think he's super marketable too. But that's going to be a tough win if he can get past Morale. But I think there's some chance there that he could be get some more of the casual fans. And the last one I was going to say, and even to your point again, was Sean Brady. is looking better and better. But even that's a big Philly guy, right? Philly or Boston. Yeah, big Philly guy. So, yeah, it's more of like the state or region or cultural background. But hopefully, I mean, I guess I do care if the last one was going to be fluffy, but again, that's the Mexican American stuff. Maybe a little bit more California too, but I think too hopefully it's just things can be cyclical or come in waves and everything. So maybe the Americans will pick it up too and start producing a little bit more top ranked fighters.
Mm-hmm. Still filling out the roster too. It's not like you're not seeing quality fighters. Like they're still finding good young American prospects. So
I mean, you take the top unranked fighters from every country, and the U.S. is winning 10 times out of 10. It's still the highest quality, and it's just missing that superstar. Which who knows? We have the White House card. I was looking at UFC events listed on Wikipedia, and that's listed on there as one of the next UFC events. So.
That'll give a chance for someone to become a star potentially. So
yes, it will.
All right, let's close out today's episode with kind of a quick discussion of who could potentially fill in here for Rafael Fiziev, who has pulled out of his UFC Rio main event against Charles Oliveira. This is obviously a massive fight. People love Charles, and it's put the UFC in a bind a little bit. Anthony, we can throw it over to you first. Are there any names that really stick out to you as guys that you'd like to see step in to fight Charles Oliveira in the UFC Rio main event?
In the UFC Rio main event, I think this is one to. I mean, you guys usually a little bit better at this than me. I know the Fiziev pick was kind of odd, I think, to us. I thought we each said there was other people we wanted to see. I'm trying to remember. I think I see Dan Hooker right there.
He did just break his hand, unfortunately.
Booked. Okay, never mind. I don't know. I guess I'd say Max. There's Max Holloway, two stars, fun. Stuff like that. I don't know. I would want to go someone with a bigger name. I don't quite want to. They were going the more prospect route, or not prospect route, but like a tough matchup route with Fiziev and stuff like that. And I don't know if I'd be willing to do that, but I still think you could maybe milk Oliveira, give him some fun, entertaining fights against matchups that people want to see before we start maybe trying to build a name off of him.
So, hold on. Unmute that.
Good. James, if you want to go.
Yeah, I'll hop in here. It's kind of a little bit of a tough scenario here because I don't think there's anyone good who's going to step in. I think the best option as far as ranked opponents go is probably Gamrot. And then after that, you start looking at some of the unranked guys we've talked about before, whether it's like an Alexander Hernandez, even though that feels like a quick turnaround, maybe like a Chris Duncan. And it's just getting to a point where it's like it's nothing overly interesting. I don't think we're going to get a high level of talent. Maybe Renato Moicano. I just feel like this ends up being a big opportunity for an unranked guy rather than a big fight as a fill-in. The one guy who I'm interested to see if they go with this is Diego Lopes said he would take the fight. So I'm interested if seeing if that's a route that they would be interested in going in, because I'll tell you what, that'd be fun.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I was going to bring up. That would be a hell of an entertaining fight, especially stand up, yes, on the ground, yes. It'll just be good everywhere. It does look like Gamrot might get the call, which it just doesn't seem that exciting. But otherwise, the only other one that I would throw out there, maybe, I don't think Paddy has a fight. And if they're going to give
Paddy's fat ass is not making the weight on like 3 weeks notice.
Actually, that is a good point. I forgot.
Unfortunately, so if they want to fight at 205, Paddy will show up.
I do think, yeah.
You never know. No.
I was going to say.
I forgot about that.
That I didn't know that Diego Lopes was a fight. I think that's a great way to make a super fun fight and fun, like, at a Rio event, especially. Obviously, he's the fighter that's closer to the belt right now. So a loss against Charles wouldn't like affect the belt since it's switching weight class. So I think that's an amazing way to get around that and kind of save that card. The Gamrot I find him to be a little boring at times and winning some close decisions that I don't think he maybe won. But I could see, like, if he has a boring fight with Charles, then I'm like, really, like, dude, come on. But that one I would be okay with that. But the other thing I like with James, I think if you are going to find a late replacement, then give it to a prospect or someone that we like that has a chance. Like, you might as well, instead of going like 5 or 6 positions down and fighting someone like that's already old as well, or that we've seen him lose constantly in these ranked fights or in the top 15 and top 10 and stuff. I think going and finding like you said, like a Chris Duncan or maybe not, or Hernandez as well. I mean, he's on the win streak, but these other couple prospects that in 15 to 20 range that we think are on the fringe, screw it, just give them the shot and see how they look.
I know we've seen him get a chance before against Dustin Poirier, but Benoit Saint Denis, I'm sure he can make the weight by then, and he's coming off a very big and impressive win against Mauricio Ruffy.
Unfortunately, Benoit said no.
Oh, he did? Okay. All right.
I almost wonder if it's not a bad opportunity for Ruffy. Try and get right back in there. You still could get exposed in the grappling, but, like, maybe you'll land a shot.
And it's Charles Oliveira, so we're not surprised if you get exposed in the grappling.
Yeah, exactly. It's a high risk, low risk as far as, nobody's going to be like, oh, this bum lost to Charles Oliveira. But if you win, all of a sudden you're lost to Benoit Saint Denis pretty far in the rearview mirror as far as rankings and stuff like that go. So, all right, we'll close up shop there. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to this week's episode. And next week we'll be back with a pay-per-view preview. We've got a fairly good pay-per-view next week that will be the focus of the episode. And maybe we'll do a UFC Perth brief recap, but we'll have to see on how time goes and how next week's card is looking. So UFC pay-per-view preview, first pay-per-view in a while. But that will be the focus for next week. And like always, thank you for tuning in this week, and make sure to check out vendettasportsmedia.com, and that will be written preview will be up there, and potentially best bets on if there are any best bets, they'll be up there. So make sure to check out the website.